Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to speak to you today. I wish that I could be with you in person, but I'm glad to have this opportunity to present the 2021 Topeka Housing Market Forecast. This is a part of the Housing Market Forecast series that we do for all of the metropolitan areas across the state of Kansas and for the state as a whole. And I have to give a special word of thanks to Security First Title and Capital Federal. Their contributions make it possible for us to have this really beautiful publication that you should have at your seats today. And if you want extra copies of this publication, then we'd encourage you to stop by the Sunflower Association of Realtors office. They have extra copies, and feel free to take them and use them as you see fit. We're very grateful to these sponsors who made it possible for us to do that. In addition, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a word of thanks to the Kansas Association of Realtors and all of the realtor boards across the state, including the Sunflower Association of Realtors. We've had a partnership with them now for well over 10 years, whereby we access multiple listing service data from every single MLS system across the state of Kansas, and we combine them together to provide statewide home sales activity statistics. And so without this partnership, the Kansas Association of Realtors would not be able to present on a monthly basis a comprehensive picture of what things look like in the Kansas housing markets. And I wouldn't have access to the data necessary for this forecast. So we're very grateful for that partnership. So thank you to the realtors across the state. Well, every year when I go through and do the housing forecast, I always start with a fundamentals of what's happening in the labor market and what's happening in the mortgage finance area. And a year ago, when I gave this presentation to different groups across the state, I commented that the market fundamentals were really solid. Mortgage financing was widely available and cheap, and said there's just no way that mortgage rates could go any lower than where we were. We don't think they'll go up rapidly, but they're certainly not going to go down. And then we said labor markets were fairly healthy. But at the end of all that, I gave a little caveat. I said, it seems like there's something hovering over our shoulder and that all of this could change very quickly. I had no clue as to what might actually happen. And Jeremy's talked a little bit about the Topeka the Topeka employment forecast and what's happened in labor markets. So I won't rehash all of that, but I will just mention that the revised forecast that Jeremy has given for the Topeka metropolitan area, even though it's a slight increase, 0.7% increase for this coming year, the 108,000 jobs that they're forecasting is going to be the lowest level of employment for the Topeka metropolitan area since 1995. That's a really, really tough situation to be in. And so that has an impact on what will happen in housing markets going forward. At the same time, I said there's no way mortgage rates get any lower, and as soon as you hear an economist say anything absolute and definitive, then they're going to be 100% wrong. And so what happened last year, we saw mortgage rates drop to the lowest levels that we really have on record for the 30-year fixed mortgage rate, below 3%. The orange line on this slide reflects the Mortgage Bankers Association's forecast of the 30-year fixed mortgage rate through the end of 2022. And what you can see is that they're forecasting by the end of this year, rates will rise slightly to 3.4% and then to 3.9% by the end of 2022. This is the first time in a while that they've been forecasting a rise in rates, and it's a little bit in defiance to what has been stated by the Federal Reserve about their plans to keep short-term rates essentially zero for the foreseeable future. And so we shall see, but even if they're correct and mortgage rates rise up above 4% over the next 2 years, those are still incredibly low rates and lower than we were just 2 years ago. So very, very low interest rates. So what has this labor market situation with the sharp declines in employment last year, combined with the incredibly low interest rates, meant for housing markets? Well, when the pandemic shutdowns first happened in March, we did see a slight drop in home sales activity as people were kind of trying to figure out what was happening. And as I'll talk in a little bit, Kansas was very fortunate that we declared real estate an essential activity. And again, I'll discuss that more. But that meant that we didn't see some sharp declines in home sales activity, very slight. And then through the end of the year, home sales took off, especially in the third quarter. And while we forecast a very slight increase for home sales in the Topeka area for 2020, it ended up the year being incredibly strong. 10.6% increase for total home sales in the Topeka area, far above what we anticipated. And it really reflected, as you can see from that moving average line on the graph, a very strong, especially fourth quarter that was just really strong. And that was driven almost entirely by the low interest rates. You might ask, how do we see an increase in home sales activity when the employment situation is so bad and we lost so many jobs? And the answer, I believe, is that we've really seen a very bifurcated labor market. Those people who have lost their jobs tended to be in sectors and in industries where the employees are less likely to be homeowners. In contrast, people who are in white-collar jobs or people who are in jobs where they are able to effectively shift their activities and work remotely, their labor market situations have been much less impacted. And so as a result, the people who are most likely to be impacted by job losses and so forth were the least likely to actually be in the market to buy a home in the first place. Then when you couple that with very, very low mortgage rates, what we've seen is that those who were already in a fortunate situation could then take advantage of it further by stretching and expanding and buying houses that they may never have otherwise been able to afford. What we've seen as a result then is that inventories have gotten incredibly tight. We measure balance in the housing market through a number called months supply. What we do is we take the number of actively listed homes, how many homes are available for sale on the market right now, and then we ask what's been the average pace of sales over the past year. So imagine that there's been 1,000 homes that are available on the market right now. And on average, we've been selling 200 homes a month. Then we would take that 1,000 homes on the market divided by 200 sales per month, and we would say that we had roughly a 5 months supply. If we continued to sell homes at that pace, we would go through that inventory in 5 months. Normally, we think that a balanced market, one that favors neither buyers nor sellers, has between a 4 and 6 month supply of homes available for sale. And you can see from the chart that I have here, we have not been in that situation for the Topeka market as a whole since back in 2015. Inventories have continued to get tighter and tighter and tighter as home sales have continued to grow, but new listings have not come on the market to replace them. Well, that was just exacerbated further during the pandemic. If there was any significant impact that the pandemic had on the housing market, it was to discourage people who weren't in a position where they had to sell. It discouraged them from wanting to put their home on the market. I don't want to have all these people coming through my house and looking at it. Who knows what kind of diseases they might be bringing with them. And so supply was reduced, but demand really wasn't curtailed. And if anything, because of the low interest rates, it increased. And so at the end of December, we were sitting at a month's supply, the lowest we've ever recorded, 0.7 months supply at the end of December. Really, really incredibly low numbers. The other thing that I want you to take away from this chart is you'll notice that with the US figures, there was a spike in the late spring and early summer, where month supply went up from about a 3-month supply nationwide in March to where we ended up with almost a 5-month supply by the time we hit the middle of summer. You'll notice that that spike did not happen in Kansas. And that is a direct result of what I believe is a very wise decision on the part of the governor to declare real estate an essential activity. If you think about it, real estate is a relatively low risk activity because it does not bring together large crowds of people all at once. It's very easy to help maintain distance and ensure safe processing as you go through the real estate transaction. But if you are somebody who's lost your job, or you're somebody who's had to change jobs, or had some personal life situation due to the pandemic, imagine the hardships that that person would have faced if they didn't have access to the services that realtors provide. And so once again, I think it was a very wise decision, and you can really see the impact of that in Kansas compared to the US as a whole from this chart. One thing that those market averages don't capture is the differences across different segments of the market. And so I picked 4 kind of different segments of the market to try and get a picture of the low end of the market, kind of the meat of the market, the most popular price range, maybe the upper middle market, and then the high end. And these are arbitrary price points. I picked below 100,000, between 100,000 and 250,000, between 250 and 400 is the upper middle market, and then above 400,000 was the high end of the market. And what you can see from this chart is that inventories have been tight for all but the upper end of the market. Matter of fact, up until the middle part of this year, we were at best balanced and maybe even leaning towards a buyer's market for homes that were priced above 400,000. What's really striking about what happened in the midst of the pandemic is that upper end of the market, inventories got much tighter. Sales really increased in that part of the market to the point now where at the end of December, we have just a 1.6 months supply for those upper end homes priced above 400,000. And I think that is really a reflection of the impact of these low mortgage rates, where buyers who are, again, they haven't been affected by the layoffs and by the job losses from the pandemic. Now they have these opportunities with low interest rates to lock in and buy something that they may never be able to afford again. In the rest of the market, and you go and you look at especially that most popular price range of 100 to 250,000, we really shouldn't talk about months supply. That 0.6 month supply in that price range translates into an 18-day supply of homes available. 16 days for that most popular price range, 18 days for homes below 100,000, and 27 days for homes priced between 250 and 400,000. So these are historically tight inventories that we've never seen in the past. And one of the things that I think is really, really remarkable over the last half of this year, and the reason that we forecast only a modest increase in home sales for the Topeka area, is that I didn't think it was possible. You can't sell a home if there's nobody selling their home. You can't close a deal if nobody puts their home on the market. And so somehow, somewhere, realtors were able to find homes for people to buy, even in the midst of these tight inventories. So I have to give a caveat here. We did not formally revise our forecast. Our original projection in 2020 was for home sales to increase by 3.9% to 3,250 units. In fact, they went up much stronger to 3,461 units. So that 9% decrease that you see for 2021, I don't believe that we'll see that kind of a decrease. Instead, our original forecast was for a modest decline, about 3%. And that 3,150 would have been a 3% decrease from our original forecast. I still expect a modest decrease in home sales activity over the coming year. And so instead of dropping to 3,150, maybe dropping down to 3,400 or 3,350, drop down just slightly compared to where we were this year. And my reason for that is severalfold. Number one, inventories are still incredibly tight. And so it does create challenges to close transactions if there aren't homes being offered for sale. Number two, I do think that, with this push in the end of the year because of the low interest rates, in essence, some of the pent up demand has been exhausted, and we may have actually stolen some transactions from 2021. And finally, even though Jeremy is forecasting a slight employment increase for this year, it's still a very sharp decline compared to where we have been. And my general belief is that as these job losses are extend for longer periods of time, they do begin to impact even segments of the market that may not have been as affected previously. And so all of those things put together, I think, are going to lead to a modest decline in home sales activity in 2021. Again, not down to 3,150, but maybe down to 3,400 or 3,350 in the coming year. So what's been happening with home prices? Well, given tight inventories and strong demand, we forecast to be a relatively solid home price appreciation. That 4% appreciation for the Topeka metropolitan area is a really, really strong, solid appreciation rate. Obviously, the last couple of years have been even stronger. And in the third quarter of last year, the latest data that we have available, there was a 5.4% increase from compared to the prior year. So with the tight inventories and the really strong demand, I think we're going to see solid home price appreciation in 2021, maybe even stronger than what we originally forecast, maybe up to 4.5% as opposed to 4.1%. I would note that at the end of 2020, the median sale price of homes in the Topeka area was up 6.2%. Now, if you'll recall, the median price is the price at which half of the homes sold for more and half of the homes sold for less. Now, the thing to be careful about median sale price is that it reflects two things going on simultaneously. Number one is underlying appreciation of the homes. But number two, it also reflects changes in the composition of homes that have sold. And so that really strong appreciation from the median sale price overstates what's really happening to individual homes because, as we noted before, the upper end of the market really took off at the end of last year. So once again, we forecast solid appreciation for next year, at least the 4.1%, maybe even as high as 4.5% through the end of 2021. The final number that we forecast is single-family building permits. And this chart shows the single-family permits in the Topeka metropolitan area as reported on a monthly basis by the U.S. Census Bureau. And as you can see, there tend to be some spikes here and there. So I put a moving average in to kind of smooth that out and see where we were under underlying trends. And you can see there was a solid increase over the course of the end of this year. A little bit hard to see, but it was a solid increase. We haven't had the year-end numbers yet. December numbers won't come out for another few weeks. But through November, we had 289 permits in the Topeka metropolitan area last year. And so we think that our forecast of 305 units is going to be pretty spot on. That represents a 22.5% increase over the prior year. We think it's going to be even stronger next year, 335 units, or a 9.8% increase. And again, that's reflecting the tight inventories and the stronger home price appreciation. But it's really important to remember that these numbers are still very, very low permitting activities. In the late 90s, we averaged between 500 and 600 permits per year in the Topeka area. And in the early 2000s, it was upwards of 600 to 1,000 permits per year. So even though we're forecasting some stronger growth, it's been relatively muted, and it will take a while to get back to the permitting numbers that we've seen previously. Well, that reflects our overall housing forecast. And as I said, we haven't actually changed the underlying forecast, but the basic tenor of it, I think, is the same. 2020 home sales ended up very strong, much stronger than we originally forecast. Our 2021 projection is that home sales will decline ever so slightly compared to last year because of tight inventories, because we think we've spent out the early demand because of the low interest rates, and because we think the labor market situation is finally going to start to have an impact. But single-family building permits, we expect to increase at a very strong pace, and home price appreciation to continue at a healthy pace as well. We do provide forecasts for the state of Kansas as a whole and for all of the major markets across the state. I'll just note that the Kansas forecast and what happened at the end of the year really mirrors what happened in Topeka. Overall home sales in Kansas ended the year at 44,040 units. That was an increase of 7.2% when we actually originally forecast only a 1% increase. Again, we forecast a slight decline next year for the exact same reasons, but permitting activity we expect to be strong and home price appreciation very robust. On our website, you can download copies of all of the forecasts for all the different markets across the state. And once again, I want to give a thanks to Security First Title and Capital Federal for making this publication available. If you'd like additional copies, please feel free to stop by the the Sunflower Association of Realtors, and you can pick up additional copies of the forecast there. And with that, thank you very much. I'm so sorry that I can't answer questions with you today, but if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Look for us on our website at wichita.edu/real estate, and you'll find my email address, and please, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.